Thank you everyone for coming. Yeah, as Sherry said, we're actually from Canada, and she's actually in Taiwan on a phone, so she's in the middle of the night. And then our other co-author is Amar, who's at UBC as well. So first of all, to get a bit of an outline of what this session, can everyone find this document here? This one? Because we're a lot of what we're going to be talking about is in here. Because I know this is interactive, and I will just check to see if I can see all of you. Does everyone see this one here? You go into the folder. Can one of the organizers tell me if everyone can find it? Because it's hard for me to see. Okay, perfect. Okay, so a lot of this today will be brainstorming and discussing. And I know it's awkward because we're on the screen, but I'm really excited to do this workshop with you today. So some of the goals are to introduce data rescue, which I think a lot of you will know what it is. It's just that there's particular protocol, and also getting more ideas from you on what kind of things you're doing in data rescue. Data horror stories and data rescue techniques, example data sets, workflows, and pipelines. And we will get some feedback from you as well on things that you'd like to share. Also a brief break, which is especially important for you. We're on screen. And also general discussion and questions. As well, I've gone through your website because this is the first ESIP meeting I've gone to, and I've found some really interesting output that's been created in the past. But I was also interested if anyone's wanting to create more output or a working group and anything else to wrap up. So just to give you a bit of a background for goals, the goals today are to discuss and share approaches for data rescue of past, current, and future data, and to discuss and pursue as relevant ESIP-supported output as a working group to explore, share, promote, and use data rescue best practice. So I didn't know who would be online or not, and it looks like we're all in person but us. So can everyone see these questions? And what I think we'll do is give you a couple minutes to write something down, and then I'll actually have you tell us with the microphone, because I thought we were going to have people online, so we can't really type it. So the questions are, where are you located? Obviously, you guys are in Texas, but where are you normally located? And what brings you to this data rescue workshop? And two, what would be useful for you to take away for your data to share? And three, do you have any resources you want to share related to data rescue? And just to kind of redefine what it is, the practice of data rescue, which is identifying, preserving, sharing the data as well as the metadata that could be lost. So I'm really excited about this topic because I, as a grad student, did a data rescue internship, a paid one through UBC. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the room. Did everyone get those questions down? Could you check, moderators, that everyone has the questions? All good? Okay. I'm just going to check the room now. Perfect. Okay, good. So couple minutes, and then I'm going to ask, because we can't get you to type, but I'd love to know where people are from. And I'll paste those into the document as well, because the format, we weren't sure, but I'll put this into the, at the top of the, yeah, and if you want to check yourself in, I see some people are doing that. I'll just share screen and put those in there. Just a second.
And did you want to have some people share too over Zoom?
Yeah, do whatever you need to do. It's perfect. Yeah, do whatever's best for people, because I don't want everyone to get all confused and stuff. So I just put the questions right here as well, if that's easier for people, because you have the sign in anyway. So see these questions.
A few people share if anybody wants the mic.
Yeah. Or type. There's also typing if you don't want to say it out loud. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sure, you have to let someone in. Yeah, perfect. We do have some people online. Hi, John.
We're going to pass the mic to someone.
Okay, thank you.
Right, can you hear?
Yes, thank you.
Right, I'm Jennifer Shupp. I'm at UT Austin in the Texas Advanced Computing Center, and I'm the science liaison for the Leadership Class Computing Facility. And we have data storage and workflow help specialist if people need homes for data, especially if you've got larger science collections. We just transferred 14 petabytes of data from NCAR to TAC. That was a talk this morning.
Mhm.
So we're used to working with large scale data sets. The scientists are responsible for their own metadata and schema and all that, but we have ways to set up VMs to host software before a data collection. Yeah, there's going to be another talk about this in the Council of Data Facilities session tomorrow afternoon. Thanks.
Oh, fantastic. And when you're saying large data sets, what type of data sets are they? Or science or all types? Like what kind of data are you guys working with?
It's any kind of data. We work with scientists across the spectrum.
Oh, perfect. If you
we
could,
don't care what your data is.
Awesome. That's great. And I think you'll sign in, so that would be great. I also took notes on that. Perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Does anyone else want to do it? Because you can also put it in the the document. Does anyone else want to orally say it? Yes, there's someone there.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Meyer. I am with the NOAA National Centers for Environmental Information. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado. And the purpose for me joining this session is we have a data room which houses just books and rolls of paper and rolls of maps and seismic lines and all sorts of stuff that is in varying degrees of catalogs or not. And it's all marine geophysical data from anywhere from sometime in the 1800s to probably the mid 80s or so. And it's in all sorts of different mediums, floppy disks, paper, hard drives, CDs, everything like that. So really any help or guidance or tools or tips or tricks or resources would be more than welcome. So
Oh, that's fantastic. And I will be talking about the Living Data Project, which is where I got passionate about data rescue, and that's with a whole whack of data. So that will be very useful for you, Brian. Thank you.
Well, I'm so glad that Brian went first. So my name is Jackie Whitty, and I'm at NCAR in the Earth Observing Laboratory, and we have a data dungeon. And in that data dungeon, we have irreproducible observations of meteorological variables on various media, similar to Brian, as well as charts on paper copy. These are data that cannot be reproduced, and they go back to the 1970s. There's also at the High Altitude Observatory, the coronal mass injection PMON alpha film of coronal mass injections that are also in analog format that go back to the 1980s. And so, like Brian, we are interested in rescuing these observations to establish sort of baseline measurements for climate studies, but also to inform future field campaigns as well.
Thank you so much. That's really useful. Thank you. Again, you'll be interested in the Living Data Project.
Hi, one more. I could be the oddball in the room. My name is Lynn Necris. I'm with the Planetary Data Systems Atmospheres Node, which is at New Mexico State University Las Cruces. And I'm spearheading a group within the PDS that's trying to recover and restore data for the climate for Venus right now. And we're pulling out data from long, deep storage systems and some on tape and other systems, and basically bringing them back online and modernizing the access to them so that we can bolster some of the older irreplaceable data again that won't be replaced, but in preparation for a set of new missions that are supposed to be going to Venus in the next 10 years. So that's a little different. Yeah.
That's so cool. And also, those that have spoken, when we're going through this, if you think of any resources you'd like to share, we have a document where people can add them, because I was really excited. I'm like, there's probably lots of people that have ideas to share. So does anyone want else to share orally, or yeah, just checking. And I see
That's it on our end.
Okay, perfect. And so we have, does anyone, number 3 down there, does anyone have any resources? And we're going to go into this, what data rescue is in more detail. So you may have ideas that pop up as we go through. So I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen. Thanks everybody who. Okay, and I did take some notes, but if those that have spoken want to put a little blurb about what they are in writing to, you're welcome to. I also took some notes. Okay, so we just did this activity, but now that we've just talked about having data, and you can see here, when you're dealing with lots of data, and it sounds like some of you have like data dungeons, and that's a great name for it, and also a whole organization, it sounds like at UT Austin for dealing with all sorts of data, and then talking about the NOAA project and even the Venus one, you're going to have probably more data than you may be able to realistically rescue right away. You may have to prioritize over time which ones you're going to do first. So one of the things, there's a paper that's linked, if you go through the document, it's by Bledsoe et al., and it's all on data rescue. One of the things to think about, and this is talking about ecological data, but it doesn't matter, it's the same for any type of data, is kind of think about what type of risk of losing it do you have? And as someone mentioned when they did their introduction, there's some data that they mentioned as irreproducible. So that would be very high risk, right? But also what value is the data like? And this is very subjective. So it depends on your objective and who your stakeholders are and things like that. So I think just because we're kind of in a hybrid format, can everyone see this chart here? And can I get someone to take, it could be the same person or it could be someone who hasn't spoken before, is to think of a data set that they're currently working with or would like to work with and think about whether they think it's high risk, high value, which was 1, high value, low risk, which is 2, low value, low risk, which is 4, and low risk, high risk, which is 3. So kind of where does it lie in that graphic? So I will go back to the room and see if there's anyone that wants to try. And I will paste that image into the doc that we're sharing, so it's easier to see. Does everyone see this in there? And I'll share that actually because that's helpful. Just a second. Do you see here? This thing here. Does anyone want to? And I can't see both places unfortunately, but could someone, the moderator, see if anyone's willing to pick a data set and talk about it a bit? Because I do think one of the people who spoke could probably do that, but also if there's anyone else as well. And you can type too if you feel more comfortable. Anyone? So for
Hi,
yes,
my name is Kathy Todd Brown. My lab does a data rescue effort where we go into the primary research literature and we elevate tables, figures, method sections, references from PDF format that may be scanned optical character recognition, or could be a more modern paper, and we transform that into ASCII, CSV tables, Markdown documents, BibTeX references. And so this is very valuable in my field because I work with soil carbon, and soil carbon moves slowly. So 30-year-old observations are really relevant for looking at trajectories of soil change. But it's a relatively stable format. These are generally published papers that have been archived, sometimes on multiple mirrors, so they're not necessarily at risk for loss per se. But they're not, neither are they particularly usable in their current format for reanalysis.
Okay, so where do you think it might lie in this? Thank you. That's a great.
I would put this at high value, low risk.
Okay, so high value. So this one, number 2, right? Yes. Yeah, and this is very subjective based on your field and what you need. So thank you so much. That's helpful. Does anyone else want to try this? Because this is like, we have so much data now. Like we used to have the problem of not having data, and now we have lots of data. So it helps to prioritize to start with, and then, find more students or whatever you need to help you. But if you try to do all of it, you may not be able to do much of it. Does anyone else want to try that? Or typing is fine too.
Hello, I am Dean Carter, and like Brian, I work for the National Centers for Environmental Information. I work at the Asheville, North Carolina office, which is mainly climate and weather repository, both digital and physical. And in Asheville, on the entire basement floor of the federal building is one massive archive. It reminds you of the last scene in the Raiders of the Lost Ark when they're wheeling the ark down the corridors of that massive warehouse. So, and I often go down there, and I kind of like to just get lost in those stacks sometimes. And one thing that I've noticed is that in those physical archives, there's a lot of knowledge that's not necessarily of scientific value, but of historical value. For example, a lot of the early science in meteorology was done by the military in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And pretty much they have stepped away from that and left it to NASA and NOAA. But so I worry about the historical value of those data sets, even if the observations themselves might not be worth that much. So, and that
yeah, because it's also says cultural, which is fantastic. I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a lot. Data has more purposes than just science, right? It has,
I think so. So maybe would that be high value, low risk? I don't know.
Do you think it's potentially, is it common? Like, is it likely to go extinct? Like, if someone destroyed your building, would there be, God forbid, but if there is there a backup somewhere, or is it very hard to find?
No, these are old paper copies from
so
the originals.
It could be one or three, like it could be high, because if you think it's important, it could be quite high risk because it could just be gone, right? So the idea
some
is
are like on microfiche or tape and things like that, so that are brittle and over time. And
I think it sounds like high risk. So this is in, because as a group we'll go later down to the paper that this is in. But if you do want to, like, say you're mentoring people, you can show them this and be like, we don't have any. It's irreproducible, as someone earlier said, right? Like, you don't have any other copies of this. So one of the things in the Living Data Project, which I'll talk about soon, is we were actually paid as PhD students and master students to digitize stuff. So that might be something like, if certain people have different grants that want to digitize data, it's a way to get students to learn, as well as make sure it's stored somewhere, right? Because it sounds like it's just paper and microfiche. Thank you for sharing. It's because it's important. There's cultural value too, right? Especially if it's from different cultures and doing things in ways that we don't do anymore. So thank you for sharing. That's really, really important. And sorry, because I can't see the room. Is there anyone else that wants to? And if not, we will move on. Okay, thank you.
Hi. So in terms of high risk, regardless of the value, for observations which are irreproducible, there's two things that I think are high risk, regardless of the value. And one of them is the loss of institutional knowledge, because with field campaigns, they're tied to a principal investigator who knows the instruments that take the measurements and who understand the data that come out of it and the final product that goes into the public eye and the public domain. So the loss of institutional knowledge, regardless of the value, is high risk. The second part is, and I think the previous person touched on that, is media degradation. Microfilm, I guess, can last a very long time, but we have stuff on like CD-ROMs or like small tapes, and the tapes especially, those will degrade over time. They're already degrading. We have data from the 1970s and 80s, and I really worry that even with modern technology that we have that can scan this stuff, it could scan blurry, and you you can't imagine what that number is. So there's high risk regardless of the value, and I
for sure, I think that's really good. And could you remind me of your name, because I can't see? What's
hi, it's Jackie Whitty at NCAR.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important. Can you, because we're going to have a discussion, a general discussion, and I think it's So I'm also doing advocacy from the Canadian government, trying to make sure that we have better early career training, because there's a lot of institutional knowledge that gets lost if you don't keep that training and understanding going. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, this is just an exercise because there's that graphic, but if you have other ideas, please jump in, and we're here to gather a bunch of, Sherry is just typing in the background, but we would love to do a working group or whatever you think would be most useful, because so many things are at risk right now with all the funding cuts worldwide. It's not just the US, it's in Canada too, and in Europe and things. And also we need to have these data for things like addressing the climate change problem. So thank you so much. So I'll go back to the slides. And so around prioritization, it will depend on every different data set. And also, I fully agree with her in that we need to preserve our institutional knowledge and also figure out ways to deal with the degradation of our current data. Have you thought of a way to convert it, or is it too difficult to like take the different formatting that you have?
Just don't have the money or the staff.
Yeah, that's right. That's usually the case, right? Yeah. So yeah. Okay, so moving on to here. So again, same paper. This is pre-AI, so it was just before AI was talked about a lot. So the idea is data prioritization, which we talked about, team creation, but again, with all these funding cuts, it's like, who's going to curate, right? Metadata creation, it's like we still have a lot of times where people aren't providing best practices of metadata creation. Data transfer, so where is it going to be given to and who's going to work with it? Cleaning and validation, because often you may have previous or even current data or future data where there's a lot of things that need to be cleaned first before it can be shared with everybody. Data archiving, some servers and things they may also have funding cuts. So do we need to store them in multiple countries? Like, it's complicated. And then sharing, like there's best practices. But another thing I was discussing, because we're all early career presenting this, is what do we do now that AI could actually create real or fake data on the internet? And so is there going to be something in the future that we need to think about for future data around, or even current or past data around data provenance? Like, who made it? How did they make it? Where did it come from? Does anyone have any ideas around AI? Because that's not a question I had already put in there, but I was wondering if anyone's been thinking about how that's going to affect data integrity more generally. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? And I'll move to the next. So I was very, very lucky. There is a graduate student to postdoc project called Living Data Project, and it has, when we do our general discussion, I'll show you many more examples, but it has graduate students go through courses on best practices of data science, including cleaning data, metadata, things like fair use. And it has us work with a professor or another person to make sure that their data gets digitized and put in a format that can then be archived. So the great thing about the program is it pays you to meet with I had got to meet with multiple previous grad students on a vegetation data set that was 47 years by a professor who had different grad students. So I got to meet with all of the different, it was cool. It was like a bunch of different grad students as some of them were already almost retired themselves on this data set with vegetation and soil. And I had to meet with them and be like, what kind of metadata do you need? Because not all of the data was with the same practices as we have today. And so the good thing about the Living Data Project is it has funds set aside to train and also work with the partners. And so I'll show you more links about it, but it's a really cool idea and it helps train in best practices. And it's still running, so it's great. And there are multiple data sets been done this way. And then once we got our data on the internet, what's really exciting is we got approached by one of these authors here, and we ended up getting part of co-authors. There's 400 people on this paper. Because we had properly archived and metadata and best practices, it was picked up as a data set to be used in a time series. investigation. So there's 400 authors. It's kind of just a data paper, but it was really exciting that because best practice were used, this data set was actually picked up for better use just a year later, which was really cool. So question for the audience, and you're welcome to type this in the document or say it orally. How can data rescue be useful for your discipline? I think we've talked about that already, but how might we prevent for future or current, because we have talked a lot about previous things, but how can we improve our current data practices and also future data? Like, what are things we need to do for future things? And I'll come back over here. Thanks. Anyone have any thoughts on future use? Because I'm a little worried with all this AI slop and things. Like, what are we going to do? Because I've been looking on the ESIP website and there's some best practices papers coming out. Does anyone have any suggestions of how do we address current and future data to make sure it doesn't get lost?
Hi, this is Lynn Necros again from PDS. And I'm thinking about this from the, again, this is the Venus perspective, but part of the general purpose there is that I think moving forward, our biggest concerns have been making sure to denote provenance, like you had said before, and making sure that connected documents and all the connective tissue with DOIs and everything else that are there are well documented every step of the way. And that gives you the benefit of being able to tie these things back to either past data sets, past efforts that are either no longer there or have been resurrected in some particular way, or just pushing forward the information to the next generation on that. But that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Thank you. That's really important. Does anyone else have any suggestions? The DOI is especially important. So in addition to Sherry and Amar, we practiced this with one of the high school students I mentor, and she's like, I was trying to find something in a paper and the DOI didn't match. So something as simple as making sure that the data DOI matches because she couldn't find it. So it sounds like just simple things would be good. And do we know how, as a scientific community, we could better make sure that our data is actually being able to be accessed? Because sometimes DOIs just float. Because I was looking and there's something like called a permanent DOI. Does anyone know more about that so they could speak on having more permanent access to some data that's already uploaded? Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. I'm waving the mic around to see if somebody else wanted to answer that question because I had something for the previous question.
Oh, you can still answer the previous one. Go ahead.
So I have a somewhat controversial assertion here. For single PI studies, I think we should continue to encourage our colleagues to publish in the primary literature and print their data as tables, either in the associated SI or in the primary paper. And I say this because we don't have I don't think we have the semantics worked out to ensure interoperability at this time.
I agree.
For those heterogeneous data sets. So I would rather have them in a PDF format that I can then later go in and harvest from that PDF that has that classic method section associated with it. You know what field it was collected for, you know the time period that it was collected, so you can analyze it within that context, rather than having these disconnected data sets floating out on, I don't know, Figshare with minimal metadata associated with it. So that it feels like a controversial take here, but that would be my assertion right now, given the standards of the field.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's important to have both, because I think having what you just said is important for meta-analyses, right? Like, people are not necessarily going to dig into this weird data set. And I did have trouble one time running code where someone's like, oh, my data does this, and I couldn't reproduce it. So I know what you're talking. It's just really frustrating. And people may not have the time or expertise to actually reproduce exactly what was there if the code is broken. So I think we should actually have, that might be something a working group could do, is like, how many people feel, because I think there's a lot of people for meta-analysis especially would like that. So it's like something that, especially for syntheses, we would want our data archive, but also a PDF that clearly provides what it was done and in a table format. Do you know what I mean? So you have both access. Yeah, thank you. That's really good. Very helpful. I appreciate it. Anyone else?
Yes, this is Raleigh Martin from National Science Foundation. I wanted to raise a point. I think data management planning is really important. The reality is that data management is inherently resource constrained. We are never going to realistically preserve all data that are generated. And I would argue, nor should we. And I think it's very important at the outside of a project to actually think ahead as to which data are worthy of preservation and to focus one's limited efforts on those data rather than trying to preserve everything when given the proliferation of AI and data intensive research methods. There's just the volumes of data being produced are just skyrocketing, and is it really necessary to worry about every single data set rather than just focusing on those that are most essential for reproducibility and reuse later on?
Yeah, and I think it depends on the goal, right? Like some people may want to have cultural things. Yeah, but that's why prioritization. Thank you for mentioning that, Riley. That's really important.
So I've got a follow up to that as well, because I agree with that completely. But what we've seen also with at least with some of the NASA grants and some of that is the proliferation of no cost extensions at the end of projects, so people don't take the archiving responsibility very seriously. So they may have a great DMP at the beginning of the project, but then the project mutates as science tends to do, and the data doesn't come in the way they think it is, or there's a difference in the way that the data changes over time. And so following up and making sure that the data management plan or the changes to the data management plan are followed through on to make sure that the archiving actually happens. Because we've had tons of those in the space sciences, especially, where it doesn't get completed for some reason.
Yeah, and also like the person doing it, like the postdoc, gets paid, right? Like the thing is often people out of necessity have to run to the next job and it doesn't get done, right? So that's really important. Thank you for mentioning that. That's really crucial. Does anyone else? Because it's frustrating if you have a data management plan and it's a good one, and then you don't do in best practices because it's like, oops, that happens quite more than we would like it to do, unfortunately. Does anyone have anything else around like future data with AI? Like, how do you think we're going to deal with that? There might even be AI generated fake data sets that might be in a fake paper. Like, how are we as a community going to spot those? Is it the provenance idea? Like, will we have some sort of ID we attach to it so that it's known that it's human checked? Like, what do you think as a community we need to do if it's spitting stuff out? Anyone thoughts on that?
Hey, I'm Andrea Thomer, University of Arizona. So there's been a lot of research on data reuse, and most data reuse happens through some sort of social trust. People aren't just randomly grabbing data sets, or at least scientists are not randomly grabbing data sets. They're taking them from trusted institutions or they're reusing data from peers that they know. So I think social ties are very important and will continue to be very important in that. I wonder if there's other threats that you're thinking of, though. Like, I could see the general public taking AI data sets and trying to do something with it. I think that is a bigger danger than scientists using it. And and if that case, we need to work on building more trust between the general public and trusted institutions and things like that.
Well, I also think if you have like an undergrad who doesn't know any better, it's like teaching best practices of knowing critical thinking of what is a trusted source. So that's really important, not just talking about, say, publishing papers, but also where's the data coming from. Because like Sherry and I have a PhD. People here have had lots of experience, but if you're starting out, you may not know what trusted sources are. So just to remind people, it's not just images or papers, it's also where are we getting our data from, right? Because that's a good point, the trusted. Because if you're just starting out, you may not know what's trustworthy or not, right? Because if you're throwing it into ChatGPT and it spits out some sort of data set, you probably should check where it's coming from, right? So if you're doing it for a term paper or something. Yeah, does anyone else have a thought on that? But thanks, that's really important. So trusted social, yeah. And maybe I was thinking it would be good. Is there anything on AI like best practices and ethics coming out somewhere? I know that the Canadian, like the UN has something about best practices, but I don't know if it will be implemented. Yeah. So then moving on to the next part.
I had a quick
point
on the last item. Yeah, Sarah Manassian, also with NOAA and CEI. I think one other thing we have to start thinking about is AI using data itself, like as we start getting agentic AI and so on. There was an interesting data discovery cluster discussion about this a couple of months ago. Like AI doesn't know what a trusted repository is. AI doesn't know what the authoritative data set is. I don't think there's an answer yet, but we need to figure out how to identify that, communicate that, build the trust with AI itself, not just with the people using the data. Because there are going to be people that are just going to go to ChatGPT and say, I don't know, analyze the temperature in XYZ place, or, you know, I think we are already seeing that happening more and more in like our Google Analytics results and so on. So I think that's a problem that is coming or already here. I don't know if we have an answer for that yet.
But it's so crucial, because if a lot of the public isn't going to take the extra time, we need to be, as scientists, concerned if it's spitting out stuff that doesn't match the scientific consensus. So I think that's really important you mentioned that, because when we have things that, especially if it contradicts, like say the scientific community took their time slowly to get data sets and they say one thing, and then Google Analytics spits out something that's completely erroneous, given the problem with like just how things are communicated, it could run and be a viral thing where they believe the Google Analytics over the scientific data. So it's really important for us to think about the implications. Thank you for mentioning that, because I think AI is actually rapidly improving, and what you're suggesting is not far off, or potentially is starting, where people are using it and it's just spitting stuff out, especially if you're doing vibe coding or something. So I'm going to...
I'll just add very, very quickly. There is this is Brian Meyer with NCI again. Really quickly, there is the Model Context Protocol, the MCPs, that do establish more trusted gateway connections with AI, different libraries, Claude, Gemini, and things like that. So, there are ways to sort of enhance those communications in a trusted manner with these models so that they are working. And it's in the AI company's best interest to connect to these trusted data so that the people using them get that data. So I think there is work being done to build those more trusted pathways.
Fantastic. Thank you for mentioning that. So getting back to
Let me just add to that, Azila Maradi from NCI. I think at some point, when you mentioned the DOA is not matching with the data, and that is something where you also have to use your brain in some contexts and do your own test. You have to check these things at this point. Tons of references get generated by AI and then are thrown into papers. And you need to, you don't need to have a graduate student do it for yourself. You can just sit down with a cup of coffee and check these things. So at some point, we have to step back and look at this and then make, some judgment calls, but also kind of use our brain and our spidey senses to make sure that things are matching up. And the same thing could be said with data management plans, because we all say we're going to do a lot of great work, but no one ever follows up. And I'm not creating data anymore, but I'm an archivist, so I look at data. And so, but no one is also, this is a second thing, no one is being held accountable, except maybe the next time they go to get a grant from that granting agency and they notice that their data has not been archived yet. So there's a stick that may or may not be used at some point, but there is absolutely no incentive to archive your data at this point either.
Yeah, which is so important, because the incentive is not there. I really appreciate you mentioning that, because if the incentivization isn't there, it won't probably get done, because people are really busy with everything, right? So that's really important. The person who brought that up, because we were practicing, was a high school student who's learning about science, but she did say her professor who was mentoring her had the same concerns. So I do agree. I also think it's sad that we make those data management plans and then there's no accountability, but it's something to think about as a community. Like, is there a way that people, like grad students, get paid to do that right before they leave their thesis or something? So one thing, we're going to have a break soon, but not quite. But I'm just going to switch us to, we have had some of these, but some data horror stories. So if you don't properly think about things like data management, these are real ones that we as a group of us, so there were multiple people who thought of these, not just Sherry and I and Amar, but some things were such that data didn't have clear metadata, and the person who got that data set had to email a bunch of people at a university because nobody knew what the columns meant, and they had to locate it to find the person who the person didn't know. So it was really confusing. And then also there's somebody who knew of someone who had paper data in a greenhouse, and it was chewed on by mice and there wasn't backup. And then another one was the one I mentioned about the DOI. And then another one that's especially useful to talk about in this current age is like having directories with data and file structure, but when you change your management system, because maybe you work and the Canadian government or maybe the US government or maybe your institution changes their policy of things, and then when changing the structure, it actually corrupts the data or doesn't work. So that's another one. So I think some people have already given some things that are massive undertakings, but does anyone have like a horror story? And what could we do to prevent or address that with data rescue? And then we will soon do a break and then we'll do a brainstorm. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'm actually going to go first. So, I think this is a great community. This is definitely speaking more broadly without like identifying problem areas. I think that a lot of folks, at least in the meteorology community, kind of separate themselves from the data science world of things. And so, for example, if you are collecting observations, kind of just assuming that it's somebody else's job to take your data and log it and provide the right metadata, or like after a field project, making sure that groups are doing a great job. And I know that we have groups like EOL that support a lot of like the field data collection and things like that. But I think there's a stigma that, I don't know if it's laziness, as people like to say about my generation, but people who just kind of throw it and say it's collected and there's not really much done afterwards. Not really thinking about, okay, how are people going to use this after me? Just because you're responsible for collecting it doesn't mean that you're not responsible for, preserving the metadata, the integrity, so that future scientists.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Do you think there's anything that can be done, maybe mentoring people? Like what would you do to address that issue?
Yeah, I think, well, it's hard for me as a graduate student to go and mentor scientists who probably don't want to hear it from me. But I think it's really just awareness, right? I mentioned that I would like to hope that as scientists, it's more of like an unknowingness thing. They're not doing this intentionally to, intentionally put future scientists behind, but making communities like this and resources that, different agencies or different groups provide scientists like more accessible to folks that maybe lock themselves away in their office and just do their science research. And that's really it. And don't open their eyes to like the data science side of things.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So in my previous life, when I was working at Goddard, we were undertaking a large project to harmonize our ozone sonde data. Okay. And one of that harmonization projects was involving reprocessing ozone sonde data at Wallop's flight facility. And they have been launching ozone sonde since the 1980s. And I went down there to get my hands on the raw data so that I could digitize it and analyze it. And I learned that the data that it was stored in a room, and they decided they didn't need it anymore and they threw it all away.
Oh no. So
I had to almost kind of reconstruct the data from sort of paper copies. And thankfully, we had institutional knowledge. George Brothers, who was launching the data at the time, and he retired since then, and I had him help me reconstruct that data. And it was really hard because sometimes in the paper copy is, if you cannot read their writing, then it's very hard, right? Because it wasn't typed in, it was written in. So the lesson learned there is, please do not throw away your data. And because so that was my data horror story.
Whew.
And I feel like cleansed having shared that with you. I'm hearing the gasp around the room. So thank you for
The
that.
data confessional. Thank you.
We've got a couple here.
So this is not a data horror story, but a maybe hope for the future kind of thing. So there is a data science K-12 movement. I'm a little bit external to this group because I do have a big focus on K-12 education. But one of the things that we've been working on for the last several years is this notion of the data cycle. And what has been left out a lot of times in middle and even elementary kids is what is the metadata? You got to tell something about your data. Go out and collect butterfly data, whatever it is, but now make sure that you're tagging it with metadata. So that is making its way now. And that is hope for the future if we can get young kids who are interested in science or just interested in general to understand metadata. Way a long time ago, I was at the Digital Library for Earth System Education. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It was an NSF project creating digital libraries. And there were all of these people talking about metadata, like analogies to card catalogs and all this kind of stuff. And I just thought, oh my God, this is just overwhelming. But over time, I realized it's so valuable. You have to have the right terminology, simplify it so people understand it's just information about your data, but it's so important. Who collected the data? Where did the data come from? What's its provenance? What are the ethics? Should you be sharing this data? So anyway, just offering that as hope rather than a data disaster story right now.
That's fantastic because we're going to also put solutions in the document. So I really would love for you to type a little bit more about that when we get to that stage, because we're also going to, as a group, share best practices. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
So I think one of the things that makes metadata so difficult for people to provide is that data is always context specific. And if you're a data producer, you're working from one context. And if you're doing a reanalysis, you might be working from a second context. So that's oftentimes when I talk with my colleagues who do produce data, what their main frustration is with providing metadata. My frustration as a data user with looking at the metadata and working with metadata is that it's oftentimes both more specific than I need and not specific enough for what I'm looking for. So you've got that sort of curse of the standard where in order for it to be generalizable, it has to be so broad that it's not useful. And yeah, it's but it's so specific. Yeah, anyway, that there was an analogy in there that I'm failing at the moment. But I think that that's something that's really important for us to remember as we're walking this very well-tread road about frustrations with metadata, is that there is a context there that's implied that's often not exposed.
Yes, thank you for that. It's really, and it's often a problem, right? Because you have a specific use and it's not direct. It happens all the time, right? Yeah.
This is Lynn again from PDS. I've got a line in my talk tomorrow that actually it fits to this very well, which is it's metadata is not paperwork, it's infrastructure. And I think a lot of people, and especially with data management plans and all these other things, people take the lazy route. They don't want to do the archiving in the first place. It's too much work. They don't get credit for it. What's the point of that? And I think that we have a paradigm shift that we have to come up with for the future, kind of back to your other point earlier. That means that we have to put the effort in to get the metadata right and to have high quality metadata across the board. But having said that, doing that without any incentives is making it really hard to get data providers to do this. And we have this problem, I know, with the planetary sciences all the time, is that funding runs out and the last thing they want to do is archiving. But I think that, advertising, we've had a big success rate, a little bit of a turnover in this by advertising that if you're going to get a DOI for that, treating a DOI for a data set publication is the same as treating it as a publication for another, as writing a regular manuscript publication. I think that gives people a better incentive, but that's a cultural shift, right? Because we have to give it the same worth as producing other things like your general journal papers. I think if people saw that as the same idea, that they were, the DOI for that data set is just as important as the paper, I think that changes the culture a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of this is cultural, I think. Good point.
Yeah. And so really quick, just to chime in on that, I'm actually going to plug, there's another session tomorrow, I believe, that actually talks about the incentive on this. So some of the work in, publishers requiring, fair data and adequate metadata with the data that they're publishing with and things like that. So if you're interested in hearing more, I recommend the COP Desk session. As the fellow for that group, I think that ties well into what some folks are talking about here today.
Thank you. Thanks for mentioning that. Does anyone else have anything to share? Okay, I'll just share screen. So there's the next part was to take a break because I want to make sure people can go because it's almost been an hour. So if you want to take a brief break, we're going to actually get to this document to do a brainstorm because we've started doing some brainstorming. So it's perfect timing, but I wanted to make sure people could have a break and then we'll go back to this data examples bit. So about 5 minutes or so, just to take a brief break. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So could everyone get to this document here? Because we're going to actually get people to brainstorm. Can everyone see this here?
Everyone, yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay, so can you get into this? And if you're on Zoom, I put the link there, but if you're not on Zoom, it's in the file. So I'm not sure the best way for you to get there, but we're going to go over some of these questions. So what do you think you need to better do data rescue? So Sherry's been typing some stuff in, but we would love for you to kind of provide some ideas. So does everyone see this document? And can you get into it? Because I know that there were some people like typing in the other session. So yeah, I see someone. Perfect. We have a frog. And so think about the first one. Like, what do you need to do? So it sounds like funding is one of the biggest things, right? Like to properly do these things, we might need money, right? And also it was saying like time and potentially institutional knowledge. And then the second question is, do you have any examples, approaches, tools? Because I'm going to go through some tools and repositories and workflows in just a second, but I was wondering if anyone has. So someone mentioned there's going to be a session tomorrow. And then 3 is, how might we use different approaches to address these different ways of rescuing? And then also at the end, we're going to go over different ways we might do an ESIP supported output or a working group if people are interested. So does everyone see those questions? I'll just give you a couple minutes to find this and see if you have anything to type, and then we'll do a more general discussion after this. Can everyone find this? And the Zoom, it might be, I can always...
Is there any way you might be able to zoom in on that doc a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
I think just the projection is on the walls a little small.
Is anyone able to log into it? Like, because I think there's people I can see.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
That work? Can you see it better now? And also I can stick the link into the Zoom link if that helps. There.
It's not just me.
So I guess I'll keep doing things orally because I think the technology is having some hiccups. But I answered some of these questions below. So I had like guidelines. There's this paper by the authors I had mentioned before, and it's in the folder if you want to get access to it. And it gives 7 different things you can do to work through your data set. There's also the Living Data Project, which I mentioned, that they actually pay graduate students to archive data. So there's some examples here. And I found some ESIP supported outputs. So there's Science on Schema and schema.org. So this is specifically around kind of metadata. And then also there's some cool, very interesting physical sample curation sample guides and a bit more on FAIR data I've noticed from ESIP. And then some more notes from Sherry where around the Canadian government may have some approaches we're trying to do around open repositories. There's also further that I can put here at a later date. And the third question I answered is like things are changing and it's important that we think about not just past data, but how things will be useful for climate change. And then the question that really I'm interested in at this point is, what kind of things could we do as together, or maybe the next session that's tomorrow, maybe this can be brought up again, but to fit the ESIP mission of making data available to everyone and empowering people, and how could that be done in a working group, or who knows? So that's kind of like my answers to these questions, just to get you guys a bit of sense. And I don't know if people can access this. But let's try to see, the person who's from K to 12, could you tell us the website? Because I think we can probably get someone, if you're not able to access this, to write it for you. Because I don't know the name of the initiative that you're doing with the mid. Is there like a...
Are you talking the K-12 data science?
Yeah.
Group?
Do you have a website or something?
Yeah, I'll pull it up and put it in there. Okay.
Perfect, because that can be thrown under too, like wherever you think would be a good spot to stick it. And then we could have, I guess, a general discussion, because it sounds like there's some interest in this. And I would love to know what would be most useful for people if we wanted to get people together to do more of this, because it sounds like there's not just this session, but multiple sessions on this topic, right? So that's pretty much, this is the... How frequently are they done? It's becoming more prevalent, as mentioned. What do you think would be improving that collection? Also, the question I really find interesting is who might benefit if we do this better? Because there's a lot of people that miss out if we don't do this properly, right? So the main thing is, these ideas were the goals today. So we did touch some approaches, past, present, current, future. But I'm really interested because there's a lot of people here who've gone to multiple meetings. This is our first one. So I'd love to know if there's any approaches that could be done for output or working groups, or how to best get all the different sources together. And so, because it might be hard to see this, but it's like, this comic is like, oh, I have this great idea and it's going to save the world. And then they wake up, because oftentimes things don't become what we think they are. So my goal would be like, how can we take some of the things we've been thinking about and make them relevant to something useful, like a working group or a document? Or does anyone have any ideas? Because we can write this down if it's too hard to access this right now. Anyone? Thoughts? We can do it by hand if that's easier. Does anyone have the microphone somewhere? Thanks. Tools, repositories. Because I pulled up stuff that talks about best practices for physical data that was ESIP, but has anyone seen anything at this conference that would be useful to put here related to this topic?
Hi, Sarah from NCEI again. I was going to answer an earlier question, I guess. I did have an idea of a tool that I could share. We have a set of applications at NOAA run out of NCEI that create, it's very specific, collection level metadata compliant with ISO 19115-2 metadata standard. And we have, it's very specific type of metadata, but you can also, there are a couple other metadata transforms you can do in the tool. But anyways, I just thought I would mention, it's an enterprise level tool. We've actually recently-ish opened it up to non-NOAA users to be able to access it. So I don't know, I think having tools like that are meant to be, maybe not super specific in a particular discipline or field, that can be widely used, can be useful, because like we've been talking about, metadata is not glamorous. There's no incentive often at institutions for people to create metadata. So to make it as frictionless as possible, I guess you could say, to create it, I think is an important place to start. And
yeah.
Did I say the name of the tool? Comet? It's called Comet.
Oh, Comet. And do you have access
to this?
Yeah, that would be
URL
fantastic.
in there. Yeah. Yeah, I'm the product owner for it, so I can answer questions if y'all have it, or pass it on to our developers.
Could you explain a little bit more about it? That's fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, it was built, it is a tool for NOAA to create metadata that folks at NOAA have to create. But, we realized that we've heard interest from other folks that we work with, sometimes data providers, sometimes just folks, we work with in other organizations who are interested in it for their own data management purposes. So it does require a fair bit of subject matter expertise, and I think we're interested in learning how to make a tool that is less, I don't know how you would say it, like less specific, less like niche, something that you don't have to be an expert in the metadata standard to be able to use. Because again, no one really wants to make metadata. So how can you make it as easy as possible for people to create the metadata? But I think, for our purposes, at least it's a good start. It'll prompt you on various different fields to fill in how to format them. And then at the end of the day, if you're a NOAA person, you can go through our publishing process to make the metadata public, but non-NOAA people can still export the records that they create and then use them in their own tools, which we think is useful. I haven't heard a lot about people using it yet, but it's been out there for, I think, a year now for non-NOAA use. So I guess if anyone is using it or has interest in it, feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. And I was still trying to find the K-12. Is there a name for it with a website, or is it more just standards? Because I wasn't able.
Question 3.
Okay. Well, no worries. I'll look for it. Yeah, thank you. So, because it helps to kind of like it. There's so much stuff out there, right? So thank you. And did you think of any, like, you're teaching K-12, but is there anything that we can do to make it helpful for you or do you guys have a best practice approach you're already taking? Like what's...
Well, I've been teaching kids and students to use data, GIS data set. So I'm very concerned, as everybody else is, about the rapidly disappearing data sets, because lessons have been designed around things, and then you're pointing them to this portal and get a 404 page not found, which is awful. And then in other cases, it's I'm sure many of you in this room are aware that it's bad enough if they take down page valuable data, but now some of them are being replaced with scientifically accurate data, but not data that is the critical data, like human-induced climate change data. So for me, it's God forbid, something I put up there on the web is now pointing to not misinformation, but information that is cherry-picked or, designed to tell a different story gives me nightmares. So I don't know what to do about that. I've done a ton of online curriculum development in the last 20 years. So it's a wonderful thing to put stuff online, but it's not great to point to portals or point to pages that no longer are accurate.
Yeah, it's a big problem, right? Because it could be scraped and used in weird ways. And because I've been looking on the ESIP website, and there are some cool things on metadata and fair use. Is there anywhere where is there a repository of all these different resources? Because I'm new. This is our first ESIP. Can anyone tell me where to find all these? Because I'd like to put them. Because Sherry and I are curating this and trying to put more in. Because I would love to. Because there are a lot of early career interested in archiving and metadata and this stuff. So we can, because we're concerned about things like climate change, and we need good data to address things like climate change. So is there anywhere I can look that has all these different initiatives around data specifically? Anyone know? Because I've been looking on the website. I'm not sure. Anyone have any ideas? And I found some, I'll share a screen of some of the ones I found because I was excited. There's the, just give you the share. There is, this one, which is to track provenance. So it's actually a paper specifically designed for that. So it's how to get physical samples properly archived. So that was pretty exciting. Can everyone see? Because I tried to make it a bit bigger. Do you need it a bit bigger than that? How's that? Okay, so the idea is to better track provenance for these physical samples, and it came out in Nature, and it's using the ESIP physical sample curation cluster. So I was thinking if we do have these examples, and maybe it's with soil, it could still be quite relevant for, say, like Venus. Like there's a lot of best practices that maybe you need a bit of different context, but some of the things are the same. So I just thought this is really cool that there's actually a paper specifically to improve discoverability of physical samples. And when I was researching for this talk, I found something around biobanking and stuff. So it was like, how do we better preserve like actual living tissue or samples in cryopreservation? Is anyone involved with sort of a study that, like with your specific thing, that might have a paper around better tracking provenance?
Data stewardship cluster would have some of those. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but there are aspects like communities and clusters that work specifically on that.
Yeah.
So it seems like that they would, and I was trying to just pull up any publications put out.
Yeah, this is
on their Zenodo.
So should I go? Where's the Zenodo? So I should look on the Zenodo.
Yeah, just trying to Google it, say timeout. So, but I don't know if that's just the connection here or what balance.
Yeah.
Too many uploads of posters at the last.
Yeah, because we're.
It's just sites on this Wi-Fi. Yeah. Okay. And my computer uses like your Wi-Fi is preventing from accessing this.
Yeah, because that's great. Well, I'll put it because I was thinking, given this, like, because it's very impressive what ESIP has done. I was like, well, if there's things, and I also found that there's a data group that meets. Like, there's because I signed up for it right before. I was like, oh, how fun! So there's actually like a data. They meet once a month. So I think that there are things that we can get access to through ESIP, but it would be good to have it all in one place so people go, oh, I care about X, where do I go? So I'm assuming it exists. Yeah, the Data Stewardship Committee. I signed up because I was so excited, and they meet again in September. But you can actually meet with them on Zoom once a month. So it's
Hey,
this.
Yes. Laura, this is Alicia. I'm the community director for ESIP. But we do have a community on Zenodo. Prior to maybe 2025, a lot of our resources or products that were developed by the clusters or the collaboration areas were on a Figshare space. And then prior to that, a lot of stuff was added to our wiki. That basically information's been archived in a bunch of different locations. And so we've recently pulled together a Zotero where we're trying to basically have it as a one-stop shop where you can basically search and connect with all of these, different resources that are in all these different archived locations. We just haven't had the capacity to fully pull it together, but some of the collaboration areas, including the Sustainable Data Management Cluster, has been adding references to that resource. I will pull up these links and add them to the notes document. I'm just managing a little bit of chaos behind the scenes, so I apologize. I haven't been fully participating in the conversation, but I will get that in the notes document.
Thank you. But if you do want some Canadian, like I'd love to get involved more. So if there's a way, I don't know the best way to, because I do volunteer on different working groups quite a bit. So if there's a way for early career to help out, let me know, because I'm really passionate about data rescue. So I'll contact you directly as well. Like, which email should I email you at when the fire? Because put out your other fire first. But like, how can someone like myself who's new to ESIP get involved more? Because I would love to help with getting resources in one place and things like that, because it's important, because you have the stuff. It sounds like it just needs to be put in a place.
Yeah, I passed the mic, but Elisa said that she would touch base with you and share some.
Okay, great. I'm very passionate because like we have the technology and the resources. We just need to work together is my conclusion, to be honest, in many things, not just this. Yeah, thank you.
So
Laura, one more resource from ESIP is AI data readiness checklist, and there's a cluster working on AI data readiness, and I'm a member of that cluster. The information is stored in GitHub, so I'm not sure if there is actually something published in Zotero, on that topic. But I know for sure that there's up-to-date information on this topic. And one of the 4 elements of data readiness is data quality, in which data provenance is a good solid chunk of questions, related to data provenance. There's also a primer, which our cluster plans to started developing to accompany that questionnaire. I think it might be also a helpful resource in terms of rescuing data and making it AI ready.
Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah, because when we were researching this, because it's our first ESIP meeting, I was very impressed with all the documents and things. So it's a lot to read through. So it's great to learn more. And is there anything else that people would prefer to have, like a wish list? Like obviously funding, but would it be helpful to also have students, or like what would you, if you had a magic wand, like what would you want? Obviously funding, but what else would be helpful?
AI-based metadata extraction tools.
Oh, metadata instruction tools is what you said?
Tools that potentially can extract metadata from articles and other kind of documents associated with the data set. So it would be, of course, not without human in the loop, but that could definitely facilitate the process of complete and machine readable metadata creation.
Yeah, thank you. And for the physical samples, does it help to have people help with sorting, or are they all sorted just in a pile? Like, because people have had said there's some very old archive things. Because what's been happening with the Living Data Project is they got funding from the Canadian government to an organization that then could distribute it to different universities across Canada to literally train people and pay them to digitize data. Because it sounds like some of the data is not digitized if it's like all analog.
I think when you talk about that, that's still, it's always a money thing, and then a prioritization thing. Like there's a gazillion things that organizations want to do, and I don't know how you get those sorts of efforts to the top of the list. I've seen in the past that those are often at the bottom of the list, prioritizing going through old physical samples. Like with your program, I think you just have to have someone that's decided it's a priority and then decides to make money available for it, because it is labor intensive and it costs money to do those sorts of things.
And I think the good thing is I put links to it because it's still active and it's been around for years now. So it kind of gives a thing that it does work and students are passionate about it. And it was a great because they trained us also in best data practices. So we took courses and did that and got a certificate at the end. So it's almost like it's great for grad students because it paid part of my stipend when I did it. So yeah, I think I agree with you. A lot of it has to do with funds, but the reason why they really wanted to do this and were able to convince someone to give money towards it is like we need baseline data because it was ecology and evolution things. Because in order to understand things like climate change or species range changes, you need to have a long-term data set. So especially if it's something you can convince people that it's helpful to have that long-term data set, it's a possibility. Yeah, because that time series, the one that I worked on, was 47 years of data. That's the time span, which is fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. Is there any other last-minute suggestions? If not, we will wrap up. But I really wanted to thank the organizers because we had all online, and we also had someone who's in Taiwan at the moment for unforeseen circumstances. So it's been a lot, but they've been great. So thank you so much, everybody.